Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly workshop. Today's workshop features Gleidson, who is a co-founder of Nosh Delivery, a decentralized food delivery service. And we also have Jane, who is founder of A Taste of Cocoa. In this session, which is titled The Blockchain Cooperative, a New Era of Community-Led Business, we will seek to unpack the exciting ways blockchain is shaking up the co-op world, which is making business more transparent, efficient, and fair. So we will start off with a discussion about how merging blockchains with co-op principles is not only transforming Nosh, but it's also kickstarting a new era of business that's rooted in community ownership powered by crypto. My name is Tina, and I am your UETH host for the evening. My background has been largely focused on early stage investing for the last 5 years, most recently at a crypto fund. And prior to that, I got my career started in product and strategy. And for tonight's session, we will start off with a moderated discussion for the first part of the session, and where we will hear from Gleidson about blockchain and the story of Nosh. And then we will move into a Q&A and brainstorm with Jane to engage the broader audience with live questions. And as a reminder, these conversations are always recorded. If you have a question, please drop it into the general channel of our Discord. Any questions that we don't get to during the session can be addressed offline. And here at the University of Ethereum, the reason that we do these workshops is to inspire projects, because we believe in the philosophy of learn by doing. So as you listen to this conversation, I challenge each of you to reflect on how you can make a tangible difference using the knowledge you'll gain today. So for tonight, our speaker is Gleidson, who is our blockchain expert. Gleidson has spent a number of years in the restaurant scene, and he is now the co-founder of Nosh Delivery. And prior to that, he was a co-founder and head of growth for Chomp Delivery, which is a separate delivery service based in Iowa City. So Gleidson, would love if you could share a bit more about your career path and how you ended up in crypto.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and to share my story and that of Nosh and how we came to build Nosh. So my name is Gleidson Gouva, as Tina said, and you can call me G. That's what people call me for short, because I have too many vowels in my name or names, and they don't sound what they're supposed to sound for an English speaker, so G works. And I'm co-founder at Nosh, the collectively owned, it's a delivery service that's collectively owned by independent restaurants. And it all dates back to, I had just finished graduate school when I met this Chinese investor who was getting into the restaurant business via, using investment money from China through what's called the EB-5 Immigration Investor Program. You may have heard of it. It's a program that's been in the books in the US for many years now, 40 or 50 or something like that. But, it's a foreign investor will receive a green card in exchange for investing $1 million into a business and creating at least 10 full-time jobs for, Americans. So he was doing that, and I met and started working with him, and that was my introduction into the restaurant business. I had never done anything with restaurants before. And also, right at that time, that's when Grubhub was buying a lot of the smaller delivery services around the country, and including the one that was serving our restaurants at the time, the service was called Order Up. So Grubhub took over Order Up, doubled the commission rates that they were charging the restaurants, and they also fired the local staff that was running Order Up. So that's when we saw the opportunity and came up with this idea to create a delivery service that would be owned by local independent restaurants themselves, as a way to do delivery from the perspective of a restaurant, and also to make it affordable for the restaurant. And that was the first iteration of the model. So, and then Nosh is the scalable version of that.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure we will hear a lot more about the Nosh story in your talk. But before we do that, I would love to have Jane give a quick intro of herself. I'm really excited to have Jane Coe here tonight. She's the founder of A Taste of Cocoa. She's Austin's most prolific food blogger, and she is also an angel investor in dozens of products, including startups, restaurants, real estate deals, etc. Jane, if you could share maybe a 2 or 3 minute intro about what inspired you to go down the blogging route and the types of projects that you tend to invest in, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I started Taste of Cocoa in 2010, before Instagram was the cool thing, and started my website at tastedcocoa.com. Was using Instagram just for personal reasons, and then started posting the food pictures I was taking at the time. I was the first food blogger in Austin, and Austin at that time was not as cool as it is now, where we've been like one of the top cities that everyone wants to move and live in. So early to the restaurant scene, when we just had a few Japanese restaurants, and that was like the craziest thing to have that in Texas, and was in the right place in the right time in 2015, when I think all of us started going to social to look at where we wanted to eat, what we wanted to put in our apartments, and how we wanted to travel. And we started changing the way we allowed social to influence us on these decision making. So right place, right time. Austin also was on the up and up as tech companies like Facebook, Indeed, Dropbox started opening offices here. And so at that time, I was just one of a few content creators, as they call us now, for advertising. So on average, I partner with about 100 brands a year on influencer/advertising campaigns. So in the last 6-7 years, I've partnered with over 700 brands. It's been quite a journey. And during lockdown, that kind of gave me an opportunity to slow down for, I would say, a month or so. And I met Tina, started learning about angel investing, and realized that I could also use my brand and my platform to influence certain investments, starting with restaurant investments. So I started with a series of local restaurant investments, especially since during lockdown, it was so hard for these restaurants to pivot and be able to come in and strategically advise them on how to navigate the tricky times. And from there, started investing in CPG, fintech, real estate, and hospitality. I would say the ones that I love the most are definitely in the hospitality space. So between my partner and I, we have several investments in short-term rentals and also hotels and motels.
Amazing. Thank you for that introduction, Jane. I'm always really impressed by the diversity of experience that she has, and know that she's actually pretty influential in terms of the creator economy and angel investments in that space. So cool. Now that the audience knows a bit about you both, let's dive right in with Gleidson's talk. So Gleidson now will share the story of how Nosh, a food delivery company owned by restaurants, managed to outpace market incumbents by adopting a cooperative type business model, and how he plans to supercharge and scale it with blockchain. He will also give us a preview of this entire category of blockchain-powered resource networks, which will introduce us to this category called decentralized infrastructure networks. And so I'm going to leave the stage to Gleidson, now that you've heard a bit about his origin story, and let him pick up the story from there.
Okay, so in food delivery, in the food delivery industry, the problem that we have right now is that their business model is just economically rational to begin with. And that's because these companies, these big delivery companies, DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, have to spend an astronomical amount of money, most of their money, on sales and marketing. And that's why DoorDash registered, I think, $300 million loss per quarter last year. And that is not something that we have with have to do with our model, spend a lot of money on sales and marketing. And in addition to that, I think, Web 2 tech company will eventually reach, as we know, an extra extractionary phase, which is just in the end a part of their life cycle, right? And we can say for sure that food delivery incumbents have all reached that extractionary phase. You may have heard that just this week that Spotify announced their third phase of layoffs. They're letting go of 1,500 employees, and one of the reasons they gave for that is that capital is now very expensive, which means that money is not cheap as it was before to borrow, and that companies are having a lot more trouble with the debt that they incurred when interest rates were so low. And that now, under this new climate, all of a sudden, just generating revenue is no longer enough for these tech companies, right? You've got to show that you can make some money, which makes them even more extractionary than they were before. One of the things that makes them, I think right now, most problematic is how much it costs the restaurant, how much they charge the restaurants to deliver their food, which is in general, or on average, 30%, but sometimes it could be more than 30% on a commission, right? So every $10 that you or the user buys, $3 will stay with the delivery service and $7 will go to the restaurant, which is really terrible because restaurants have a smaller, margin than that, than 30%, much smaller most of the time. And then there's, and it's even more than 30% when you count in what these incumbents call adjustments. So if the customer calls and complains about the order for whatever reason, the delivery service will refund the customer and deduct that from the restaurant's payment. But we never tell the restaurant. The way the restaurant gets to know is they see on their statement that they did not get paid or that there was a problem with that order. So the reason why, we came up with this model and the reason why it works so well is that, it gives the main stakeholder, which in our opinion, or the way we see it, is the restaurant, skin in the game, right? And if you're old enough, you may remember, or you will remember that food delivery was initially done by the restaurants themselves, right? Because before the internet, you could basically only get either pizza or Chinese delivered. And the way you would do it is you would call the restaurant and ask them to deliver it, right? And so there's that fact, that food delivery started with the restaurant. And there's also the fact that food delivery is a very complex system. And it's a machine that even when it's very well oiled, it's still going to give every now and then. And the problem we have right now is that food delivery, as done by the incumbents, is separate. It has been separated. It's a separate system from the restaurant, in which the restaurant owners have very little, if any, control once the food leaves their store. With Nosh, we have, been able to give the restaurant skin in the game, give them ownership of the food delivery service, and we have also been able to keep the service at, a economically sustainable rate. So we charge about half of what the other platforms charge. And we do all of that while at the same time being profitable. And I think that the reason we can do that, the primary reason, is because the restaurants are so invested in Nosh, right? Because they have, again, a skin in the game. They collectively own the service. So they're so invested that they do the customer acquisition for us. They will tell their customers to order from Nosh if they want to do delivery. And we have no sales team, and we have about 40% of the restaurants on our platform are exclusively available on Nosh, which is something we're very proud of because no other company, none of the large incumbents have been able to get restaurants to be exclusively available on their platforms. So that's a level of commitment from the restaurant that we are very, very proud of. But there was now where crypto comes in is there was a problem with our model, which was how would we scale an LLC owned by a number of restaurants in a particular geographic location to other markets, right? How would we would have to create a new company, a new LLC in every new market and have the local restaurants in that market own that restaurant. And maybe you can do that with 10, 15, 20, you're pushing, but you can't do it with hundreds, right? Because it would be just impossible to manage. And so that's where crypto came in. When my partner and I first learned of crypto about a year ago or so, somebody told us that we were meeting with people and we met the contact of a contact. And he told us, after we told him about Nosh, that what we were doing was, very similar to Web3, but it's just that we were doing it under a Web2, technology, and that we should really look into Web3 and crypto and blockchain stuff because, it was something worth our time. And at first we were a little skeptical and we didn't think that was really a real thing. But the more we looked into it, the more it made just sense, and he was right. I mean, it was what we were doing, decentralization, collective ownership or ownership by the users. That's already what we were doing. And it was also what we needed. It was the elegant and sophisticated tool that we needed to scale to other communities, right? So in other words, crypto and blockchain turned out to be the perfect model for us for the decentralization we had already accomplished under a Web2 model, like I said before. So with crypto, we realized that with crypto as our base, we can expand into new markets without having to set up an LLC with owners every time. And we can adopt a co-op structure, the same one we've been using, where there can be, for example, a federation of co-ops. This is how we're envisioning it. A federation of co-ops that have the same Nosh token, for example, as incentive under one regulatory framework. And what's important here, I think, is that crypto also allows for a very efficient coordination of resources, since the financial incentives would be or are baked into the blockchain, right? So if I were to give you an example, the Nosh protocol that we're creating is going to be designed to define a standard around how value accrues to customers in restaurants, given their participation in their own networks, right? For example, what percentage of the value gets passed back to the contributors. Okay, so that takes me to this deep-in category, which you may have this term, which you may have come across. It was coined initially by Messari, I believe, in 2022, and it stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. And deep-in is a new way to build and maintain infrastructure in the physical world for anyone to use. So they are built, deep-ins are built in a decentralized way, and they're built by individuals and companies all over or anywhere in the world. And they are for anyone to use, like I said. So they are not only decentralized, but they're also permissionless. And in return for the contribution, these individuals receive financial compensation in the form of financial compensation and ownership, and an ownership stake in the network that they're helping to build, and also the services they're providing, if that's what they're doing. And it all happens via token incentives. I like to think of DePIN as the evolution of the sharing economy. So we all know the sharing economy, right? Which started with Uber and was supposed to be this new way to do business in which everyone would be sharing in this new economy. It turned out not to be that way in the end. But I think now we have the opportunity with DePIN networks to do it again and do it right. So if you think of DePIN as the evolution of the sharing economy, you can think of it as a way to build upon that idea, but making it first decentralized instead of concentrated in the hands of a few individuals or businesses or companies. So decentralized and also fairer and more inclusive to the individuals and businesses that actually build out the network and makes it all possible, right? If you think of the first drivers that joined Uber, or the first restaurants that joined DoorDash, they in the end were very responsible for companies that turned into being worth billions of dollars, right? Because if nobody joined in the beginning, nobody took the first step to join, the companies wouldn't be what they are today. But what did they get, these first users, and of all that wealth that got generated on their back in a lot of ways, right? And the answer is not much, right? But that wouldn't be the case with DePIN networks, because the people that were building the networks and providing the services would be the ones to be, not only incentivized, but also be a part of, would reap the benefits in a true way. You can see in that slide, there is a number of companies that are building in the real world in different sectors of the economy, right? And I want you to pay attention to a set of numbers that I have to share here, which is, Ms. Massari recently wrote that the DePIN sector, the DePIN sector's TAM, or total addressable market, is currently about $2.2 trillion, and that it could reach $3.5 trillion by 2028. And that number is about 3 times the market cap of all crypto today. The other numbers that's worth paying attention is that the fully diluted value of all decentralized physical infrastructure projects is currently only $5 billion. So of the potential 3.5 trillion by 2028, we are at about $5 billion today. So the opportunity is just, huge. So these DePIN projects that you were seeing on the screen, and many others that will come about, are all looking to solve. This is why it's so exciting, I think, because we finally get to solve some of the world's most fundamental problems and real problems in the real world, right? By leveraging blockchain technology, token incentives, and the power of the internet. And I think it's also our biggest opportunity to bring Web3 and crypto and blockchain technology to the mainstream, right? Because these are things that are going to be present in the real world. And then to finish, I would like to share that I think DePINs are built on 4 fundamental components that make it possible for innovation to go way beyond what current Web2 centralized networks can provide. One is the physical infrastructure, right? So the DePINs require physical infrastructure to be built out and maintained in the physical world. Then Number two is an off-chain of the compute infrastructure. So Zipin relies on middleware that allows real-world data to be ingested, analyzed, and then used to calculate user contribution and actual demand, right, in the supply and demand aspect of business. Then number three is blockchain architecture. Blockchains, they function as, I would say, you could say tamper-proof ledger, device registries, and importantly also obviously the home of token economies. And lastly, the token incentives, which tokens used as both an incentive to build out the supply side of a network, and also as the currency that demand for the network services is priced in.
Thank you for going through all of that content, Gleidson. I was going to say you tackled a really meaty topic, and I think you did it in a really tangible way, which I truly appreciate. A couple of things that you mentioned that I would love to point out. So I first met you and the Nosh team coming from Variant when you were in the Variant Founder Fellowship. And the thing that I truly love about the business is you found ethos alignment effectively with how you were leveraging this co-op ownership model and how crypto sort of fit into that. And I think that's really powerful in proving that by having skin in the game, you're able to provide better economics to both restaurants as well as your own individual network itself. I think the second point that you made, which is less obvious, right, in some ways, is that crypto resource networks basically leverage tokens to initially subsidize the costs it takes to bootstrap a marketplace. And I think that is a really powerful evolution of the marketplace. And the part that you touched on, which isn't necessarily obvious, is right, like you're saying early investors and perhaps early employees of something like Uber and DoorDash may have seen wealth creation, but the earliest other stakeholders like drivers or restaurants did not. But in these sort of physical delivery networks or physical resource networks, what is different is that everyone gets access to the same token. And so every stakeholder that holds that token as the network appreciates effectively benefits in wealth creation in a similar manner, which I think is very different than what we see in traditional networks. But thank you again for that talk. We're going to move now into the brainstorming section, as well as the Q&A section of our workshop. Before we dive in, I'm going to bring up Jane. Jane, would love for you to speak a bit about the work you've been doing with restaurants and share a quick reflection of that conversation. And then I will lead us into the Q&A/brainstorm section of our workshop.
Yeah. I really love how in this model, the economics for the restaurants are better. Restaurant owners have faced a ton of pressure from macro changes like rising food costs, labor costs, and because I work and support so many, like the restaurant chain here in Austin, seeing projects like yours that empower restaurants is really important. And I'll talk a little bit about like the last 13 years of like writing, shooting, and videoing restaurants and having also invested in them. Is like the margins are really low. And I think being able to adapt to crypto is very interesting. An example I'll pull up is when you're the go-to person for like restaurant recommendations, things to do, all the fun things, you also happen to be that person when a pandemic happened. So when 2020 happened, I had hundreds of restaurant owners, service industry, like anyone that worked in restaurants, DM'd me, emailed me, texted me, called me, they had my number, and were like, hey, either got furloughed, or I'm a restaurant owner, I just had lay off 300 people today, or the city says that we have to shift to takeout. Like, how do we do that? Like, for me, I was like, I don't know what to do. And me and a friend that does PR, we raised, I think, $30,000 to start with to kind of like Robin Hood it. We raised money from our network and my audience, my fan base, to then buy meals from the restaurants that were struggling and then provide these meals out to the hospitality industry, because hospitality workers are the backbone of every local economy. And I, to be honest, didn't realize that until I was in that and stuck in the weeds with them. And it was really heartbreaking to see and hear from so many hospitality workers that had high medical bills, and they're like, I just lost my job as a barista, or I'm a server and I now can't pay for school. Another example I want to pull up is in 2021, Austin got hit with a out of the blue snowstorm where we lost power and energy for a whole week, and people were literally freezing to death in their homes without electricity. And again, being the forefront of restaurants, everyone was struggling again, recovering from the pandemic. And what happened with that was I raised money for my audience through a tool called GoFundMe, but restaurants were not willing to drive through the snow and have their staff go through that too, to go to the restaurant and make this food and pass it out to the public, because their margins are so low. They don't have that cash on hand. And they already bought all these ingredients for a very big Valentine's Day weekend. That was the weekend that happened in Austin. So for me, like, that was so eye-opening, because I ended up just calling my credit card company. That's Carrot. They're actually a fintech company. And I was like, hey, I need a bump to $160,000 right now, because I'm about to go on a very expensive restaurant shopping spree where I'm going to pick up all these tabs. I'm not going to get this money back in a few months from GoFundMe because their process is so long, but I need to start transferring money so restaurant owners can then pay their staff right away to come and cook. And just seeing that just shows how small the margins are in restaurants. And it's really hard for them, especially with the rising costs and obviously rising costs of labor. I know Colorado, it's getting more expensive to live there. Austin is not what it was 10 years ago. Earning whether it's $10 an hour is just not suitable to live in the city now.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I think that those are great examples, Jane. I think in this Q&A section of the workshop, our intent is for you to ask Gleidson in more detail about some of the concepts he's introduced, and if there's a way to apply any blockchain to the projects that you've have ongoing yourself or have previously conducted in the past, right? So for instance, the grassroots efforts that you've taken in terms of raising money, there definitely has been crypto solutions to solve for things like this. So in this section, I'm gonna monitor our Discord for community questions. And towards the end of the section, in about 10 minutes, we'll start bringing up students to ask questions live. So Jane, I would love for you to take it away and prompt Gleidson on some questions around the concepts that he's introduced.
Thanks, Gleidson. That was a very informative conversation presentation that you did, as I am pretty new to blockchain, but I can definitely see the benefits that Nosh can bring to restaurants. And, again, restaurants have local and community in their DNA, and I can see that in my work in many ways. So my first question for you is, I'm pretty new to crypto, and I imagine many restaurants are also not familiar with the concept. Transitioning non-crypto users to this new experience might present some challenges. How do you plan to onboard restaurants and consumers with this new technology?
Yeah, we're going to have to, that is, a real thing to consider, right? We're going to have to find ways to do it that are, crypto, I believe very strongly, will eventually be mainstream, but it's not just yet. It's not right now. So we're going to have to use ways that, will not require people to create a wallet, for example, right? To be able to pay for the delivery, because that's not going to work, right? Most people are not going to be willing to do that. What we are, so we're in the process of creating our tokenomics, or finishing up our tokenomics, right? Because we started as a Web2 company. I think about a year, 6 months ago, I would tell people we are a 2.5 company. But now I say we're at 2.9 because we're getting very close to putting Nosh on crypto rails. And the way we're anticipating or envisioning it is, people are going to continue to pay for their delivery with fiat, with US dollars, and the token will be used then as an incentive for people who are contributing to the protocol, be them the restaurants that are generating orders and bringing other restaurants onto the platform. The same thing with the consumers, and the same thing with the drivers.
Right.
The one thing that's interesting, I think I would say, is that most people have, I think, and you may relate to that, Jane. Most people have an impression that restaurant owners are very rustic people. That they are not very tech savvy, for example. And there's some of that, but you would be impressed by how many restaurant owners that I've talked to about, Web3 or crypto were either very interested in the subject or told me that they heard about it and they really wanted to learn more, but they just haven't had a chance. So they would really appreciate an opportunity to get in, because in the end, I think we have to remember that, like you said, the restaurant business is very difficult. You have to be willing to work really hard until you can, making money is very hard. And these people are at their core entrepreneurs, right? There's a reason why they're not working for someone, but instead opened a restaurant. So I think, again, we're going to have to find ways to, I can't think of the word now, but to make crypto, inserted. Crypto. What's that?
Abstract away the crypto.
Yeah, thank you. That's the word I was trying to remember, abstract the crypto part. But this makes a lot of sense for people who are at their core entrepreneurs, right? Who understand the importance of ownership of their business.
Pivoting to, in delivery, there's other stakeholders. I like to understand the impact that you're making to each stakeholder. One, how do customers benefit from this technology? And then how about the drivers?
Yeah, so if we can think of first in bigger terms or from a broader perspective, right? I think about it all the time. For example, when I use Google Maps, and I will, or any other ways or any other map, and I will give it feedback, right? And I think about, why am I doing that, right? I'm not getting anything out of it other than, you might think being able to use the app for free, right? Given we know it's not free, right? It's in exchange for our data, which is a very expensive proposition. But I think we do it because we have been told, we're taught that, we're contributing to something that everybody uses, when we, only get the underhand of the product, which is to use. If I had the opportunity to give feedback to Google Maps and get, what would be in a way equivalent to, to a share of the company, right? Because that's what the token is. I would be doing that all the time, right? I would be much more invested in doing that. I think the same thing goes with delivery, right? So by using, as a user, for example, a delivery service, you will be accruing tokens that will give you, a stake, an ownership in the network, and also will allow you eventually, once the network matures, to make decisions, right, as the stakeholder. And the same thing goes for, I think, for drivers and restaurants, right? Everybody will be able to partake in this truly, I think, shared economy. That's why I said this is for me really exciting time, because we have the chance to do, we have a second chance to do the sharing economy the right way and make it truly sharing, with everyone benefiting from it.
Beautiful. And when you talk about sharing and strengthening the economy, and I would assume that's also with the local community in some ways, how do you see that play out in your market?
Yeah, so right now, the way we have been doing Nosh under Web 2, for us, one of our pillars is, we want the money that gets generated here in the community to stay here, right? Because there's a lot of money, as you know, in food delivery. It's grown a lot, right? There's like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in different communities around the country. But because of the extractionary nature of the life cycle of the big centralized Web 2 companies, they will eventually get to an extraction phase in which they're going to try to take out of the community or that as much money as they can, right? For us, it's always been a premise to keep as much money as we can in the community. And we currently do that by distributing, but two main ways, or I think a few ways, but one is we distribute the profits of the Nosh delivery company to the restaurants that own it. So the money gets to stay here. The money that is made here stays here in the community, and people understand the importance of reinvesting in your own community, right? Like you said, during the pandemic, we really got a glimpse of what it would be like for our communities to not have the restaurants, the independent restaurants that make the communities what they are. The other way we do it is we also try not only to pay, but to treat the drivers as well as we can. So that's a really big focus of ours. And we get a lot of positive feedback because of that. And then, we also charge the restaurants a lot less for the service. So that helps them continue to be a bit stronger, right? I think all of these are going to continue to be, the problem we had was, how do we scale that, right? How do we do all these things that we're doing at small scale at a very large scale? But crypto, through a federated network, allows us to do that, because we can have there could be several nodes that are administered by different groups of restaurants anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, really, that would allow for it to be done the way we're doing it here in a small community at scale.
Thank you for sharing that. Jay, maybe if you could prompt one more thing that you're curious about, and then we can start bringing up some students for some live Q&A.
Yeah, thinking about other markets outside of like food delivery, how could this work with something like Uber or Airbnb?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting, right? It's an interesting question, because I think once you start thinking about, infrastructure or real world infrastructure, there's a lot there, right? But you said Uber, so let's use that as an example. There are a couple of companies that are coming up in crypto or crypto rails, Web3, that are doing just what Uber is doing. One of them is a company called Teleport, and the other one is Drive. And the way they work is very similar to the way Uber works, right? So they're matching drivers and riders with riders and drivers with their own vehicles who are willing to drive for money. So the rider will continue to pay for the ride with fiat, with US dollar, right? And then they will receive that payment. But what's different is, since Drive or Teleport are function under decentralized protocols and not one centralized corporation controlled by their board like Uber, the drivers, in addition to the money that they get paid, they also receive the token for teleport, which I don't know what it is. For drive, I think it's DRF. And they receive a token in recognition for the contribution, right, that they get. And then they can they both have ownership and they can vote, make changes to the protocol and the rules. So that's one example. You could think of the same thing with Airbnb. You could think of the same thing. I mean, it's kind of limitless, the possibilities or the opportunity here, I think.
Yeah, it seems like any marketplace really could, with a demand and supply side or even a third stakeholder, could be decentralized. And decentralization in this case is not just really ownership by non-traditional stakeholders, but also just the way that the incentivization of these non-traditional stakeholders ultimately turns into ownership.
And it removes the middleman, right? That's also really important because it removes the middleman, which would be Uber here, and it replaces it by a decentralized protocol, which allows for cheaper prices, better payment for the drivers or the restaurants or the hosts, and then for the ability for the participants to influence the network.
Awesome. Well, we're going to move on to some student questions. I'm going to first bring up Rudy to the stage.
Hey, Al. I mean, thank you all so much for sharing your stories. I thought it was actually kind of funny how you mentioned that, restaurant owners are kind of seen as these non-tech savvy folks, prominently because I'm currently going through a process at the moment where I'm trying to buy a mom and pop shop over in Orange County, California, where I'm originally from. Cool. I'm currently in Miami for Art Basel Basil. I'm always thinking of food, so I usually call it Basil. But currently in Miami, and it's funny because I think that kind of opens up another gateway of conversation, which is we're going to be having a lot of new ownership in, I feel, these next handful of years, because you're totally right. There are a lot of restaurant owners who are currently kind of on the verge of almost retirement, which is kind of where I found my opportunity to be able to kind of come in and talk to the owner to, find a way to, broker the conversation and make a deal for the restaurant. And I think as things progress, one of my questions is, and this is more generally on the blockchain side of stuff, that I kind of have questions about is I see a lot of tenure in small shops where maybe employees perhaps don't always get the most benefits of things, but if someone new like myself that wanted to come in and say, hey, you guys have been with the company for a very long time, I kind of want to offer up, and I'd like to offer up some level of ownership and equity within that particular restaurant, with blockchain. If that's something that I want to accomplish with blockchain, how would I go about that? What would that look like? How would I create that to have it also be legitimate in the eyes of I guess everyone involved, but also the employees.
So just to make sure I understand the question is there are employees or people who have been there for a long time, and you would want to incentivize them more than new employees, for example?
Correct. New management, new leadership. But if I wanted to use something like blockchain, for example, to sort of give them some kind of stake in the company, and perhaps maybe I want to change up products, or we need different things being offered. How would any of that stuff work? I guess it's a little bit more general on the blockchain side, but applied to restaurants.
Yeah, I get it. Now, I should have prefaced that by saying that I'm not a software engineer, much less am I a crypto engineer. And the reason why I'm here and I got into this is because I'm nosy. That's not my area of training. But one of the things you also mentioned, how you do it in a way that is respected by the people that around the business. And one of the great things about crypto is that it is just transparency, right? So the way you would do it is via a smart contract that would then be, would be out for anyone in your business or outside to, have access to and to verify. So, you could create a smart contract the way you want with the parameters that you want. You would want to think very carefully and look at all the mistakes that previous companies, crypto companies, have made without realizing that they were making. Make the decisions and then tell smart contract person or engineer to create it for you. And that would be the tool that you would use to distribute the ownership the way you see, you would like to, or the initial group of owners would decide to do.
Yeah, I love that you highlighted the transparency and the automation of the blockchain again, because we did talk about that a few times in a few workshops. Rudy, maybe if we have time, I just wanted to get through a couple more questions before the end of the session, but if we have time at the end, we'll love to bring you back up for a follow-up question. But I would love to bring up Crystal next to the stage.
I'm with the University of Washington, and my question was for Jane. I just recently founded a dessert concept bakery, but I have intentions to take the operations partially online through a drop business model. And we're currently working with a local cafe to in a soft opening R&D phase to perform market research. I wanted to know from your experience with so many restaurants, investing in them, seeing where startup problems kind of arise. And with your blog as well, what were your successful areas of focus to grow your online following in Web 2? And then I guess as into the crypto side of things, how did you change your approach in establishing your presence in the face of Web 3?
Okay, I can answer the first one. So I had a lot of years because I've been doing this for 13 years now. So it was a lot easier back then because I was one of 3 content creators in Austin, and now there's maybe 100. And on the internet alone, I think, I forgot what the statistic is, there's 1 million content creators online. So for me, it was easier to grow my brand when it's always easier to be the first, right? And then after that, it's hard to then get up there where you see other people on the top. So there was that. And I think along the way, I was very lucky to build so many big brand partnerships, with Whole Foods, IKEA, Miami, a lot of big partnerships along the way helped me also get to that. And I think just being very careful with who I would partner with, and knowing that it was nothing I used IKEA, now it's Herman Miller. So it's just kind of evolved along the way. I'll touch on the restaurant part because I've had a few restaurant investments that have now closed down, and the biggest things that really hurt them was it was labor. Labor was the hardest thing, was hiring. It's just really hard to get people to work for whatever hourly wage it is, and having people show up. And this also wasn't just with my concepts. It was also with, I have a lot of friends that are also restaurant owners, and everyone is just kind of struggling across the board with getting people to come work, and then also getting them to stay without that turnover. And then also having to run such high payroll ultimately cuts into your margins and profits. And I think that's why I've seen so many concepts fold. It's then, obviously rising food costs doesn't help with that. Your secondary question, when it comes to crypto, I'm still pretty new, so I don't know if I have an answer for that. And I honestly haven't seen too much of that happen in Austin, which I also as someone who loves being the first to do something, I'm it's a great opportunity for someone to come in with an idea or concept because no one has done it yet.
Yeah, and I think before, when we were discussing how just ways that we could potentially pilot something with Jane, like we've looked at a lot of the ways that NFTs, for instance, have been used to grow customer engagement and loyalty. And we followed a lot of the projects around like Nike or Starbucks. And there's actually a company in crypto called Blackbird that is doing a customer loyalty for restaurants. And it's a crypto NFT approach. So that might be an interesting one to look at for crypto. But I like that point, Jane, that you've made in the sense that there's probably less restaurants who have adopted a crypto first approach. And so maybe that could be an area if you wanted to be a first mover in delivering your dessert concept.
Sorry, I also wanted to like think about it in terms of like a cooperative, like with NFT projects and owning like a portion of a business. I'm inspired by REI and how they're like a cooperative, like their customers are owners. And so if the business does well, so does the customers. And it's kind of like the opposite of like a vicious cycle. It's like a positive cycle where in turn, everyone just keeps multiplying and like compounding on that positive like outcome, and it just gets better and better. It's almost like, you know, the more people participate, the better it gets, and the better it gets is better for more people. And I was just thinking about it in terms of like a startup, and where, you know, instead of equity grants, you could offer like crypto opportunities and such. So yeah, thank you so much for the answer.
I was just going to say something about drop shipping because I was not a fan and I didn't believe it, but there's a local ice cream shop here that they were like, hey, can we name a flavor after you and we'll give you a percentage of sales? And I was like, sure. So they made a Lucky Charms themed ice cream and they call it Coco's Charms. So we don't get sued. And it's been their top, I mean, it is very delicious, but it's been their top selling flavor. And they started doing drop shipping earlier this year. And they were like, hey, we're going to start doing this. We want to sell your pints. Can you just repost it on your stories? And again, I was like, sure, like, this is not going to get me any money. They sold out within 30 minutes, like I think 300 pints or something. And I was like, wow, I guess I don't know anything about drop shipping. So is to strategically partner with someone in your market that has a social media following to push sales.
Cool. I'm going to move on to Matthew's question. Take it away.
Hello.
Hey, Matt.
Thank you both for taking the time to speak with us this evening. I'm a current student in University of Virginia. This question is more directed towards G and Nosh. And I was kind of just wanted to know like the educational journey behind like your customer's experience with the integration of like blockchain technology with Nosh. If you could speak more about that.
Yeah. So we haven't started that just yet. But I think that we're going to be successful, at least initially, if we, it's going to depend on how well we can abstract crypto actually in the beginning, I believe. You know, like I said before, I am confident that Web3 blockchain crypto will become mainstream. We don't know, you know, if it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years or what. But initially, you know, we haven't, or educating the community on it is not as much part. I mean, I would love to do it. You know, I have actually, my background is I have a previous life before this. My background is in education. I'd love to educate the community, but I don't think it's time just yet to do it from, you know, a food delivery platform. I think it's a great way to do it through like the University of Ethereum and some other places. Yeah.
I think generally the industry is moving ideally towards a place where consumers don't have to know everything about crypto in order to engage with it. So I think adding in the abstraction components would be.
Yeah, just like they don't really know about, most people don't know the protocols running the internet, right? If you ask someone about the HTTP protocol or the SMTP for email, you know, like most people cannot explain that or know or understand how it works, right? But yet they still use the services and the products every day, right? Successfully. So
thank you so much for that question, Matt. So I'm going to close out this session. And then Rudy, would love to have you ask our final question of the evening. But closing out the session, we will follow up with a recap via our newsletter. And we are also launching a blog this week, so check that blog out. All right, with that, thank you all, everyone, for being here today. And we'll follow up with the recap via the newsletter. And we will also follow up with a link for the blog post. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.